today I thought I'd take a look at something a little bit different, or not that different in the grand scheme of things, which is this. It's a VCR. Plays VHS tapes, but this one is something a little bit special, just a little, because this one is from 1979, which is fairly early on in the history of the VHS tape. It was the American release of the VHS format was in 1977. So this is a fairly early example, not the earliest, and there were quite a few different models on the market by the time this came out. But it is a very early one. In fact, it only has long play and short play. There's no extended play speeds or anything like that. The other thing that makes this one kind of interesting is that it's portable. It's got these pegs on the side here and here, and those are for attaching a shoulder strap. You'd sling this thing over your shoulder, and the reason you'd want to do that is right here, this port labeled camera. You would plug in your compatible video camera, and you could take this on the go with you, and you would have a portable video recording solution way back in 1979. And this wasn't revolutionary at the time. There were quite a few other portable VCRs at the time, but this is the one I have to take a look at, so let's take a look at it. So this wasn't just a portable unit. The idea was there was a tuner accessory, a TV tuner, and a timer accessory, timer record accessory that you would buy with it. That would kind of live at home with your TV, and normally this would plug into it, and you'd be able to set up recordings and from your rabbit ear antenna, that sort of thing. And then when you were ready to go off and record little Johnny's recital or whatever people recorded in 1979, you'd unplug everything and you'd grab this and take it with you. And then when you got home, you would be able to plug it back in and watch again the thing that you had just watched. Anyway, it would have set you back. If you lived through the early 80s and you never saw one of these, don't feel too bad, because one of these would have set you back about $1,200, which in today's money would be the equivalent of going out and buying a $4,300 Blu-ray player, $4,300 in 2020 money. So if you never saw one, that's probably why. It does have kind of an interesting, I like that rising up mechanism there. It does need some cleaning, but that's a problem for later me. There's not really a whole lot interesting to look at. It's a VCR. There's tape transport buttons. These are all little micro switches, which is kind of interesting for the era. I would expect them to be big clunky switches, so that means there's got to be some kind of digital logic in here that controls everything. Anyway, I'm going to pause and set up the camera again and kind of get a better look at this in terms of getting it turned on. Couple things to note about getting this turned on. This is the external power plug, and I really should have I have the tuner module that has the power supply for this. It's in storage. I really should have researched this ahead of time, but the main reason I would want that to test this out is because this is a really big, like, chunky connector, and I don't have any lying around. I'm gonna have to come up with a solution for that. The other thing that's notable about getting this powered up is, and this was common for AV gear back then, this is a -2 tip, positive to the shield, which is kind of the opposite of what we would expect for barrel jacks like this nowadays. So I'm going to have to be careful when I wire that up. And here's the money shot, if there is one, the battery compartment. I guess the battery compartment would be the money shot for a portable device. A few other little interesting things. This RF modulator just pops right out, and it's got a card edge connector on it. So I don't know if you know, the channels that people used to tune stuff like this into their TVs, I don't know if that wasn't standardized at the time or as standardized as it became, or if this was designed for use in multiple countries, so they wanted you to be able to swap this out, or they wanted to be able to swap it out before shipping it to you, or if they thought that you would be traveling to other countries with it and you'd want to be able to swap out your RF section for whatever was appropriate locally. The battery is clearly protected by an internal fuse, so I would like to get a look at that and just see what the protection looks like. I'm also believe this is the same size connector, so I'm probably going to be able to salvage that. I don't think there's really too much point in keeping the battery intact. I think it's going to have to be replaced anyway. Kind of doubt it has any charge left on it or could take any charge. So I'm going to take a look at the battery next. So this is the battery on its own. You really don't need this label of lead acid battery. It is quite dense. Also, I'm not really sure what else they would have used back then. Whatever they're using to protect this is inside this cap here. I think this is probably a standard cell which ends, you know, at this seam here. And this is what they've added on. My plan of attack, I'm going to go for this kind of clip here. I don't know if you can see that clip, and see if I can get in. And I know, maybe I should think about preserving this, but if I want to restore this thing to its original glory, what I'm going to have to do is figure out what standard size pack this is, see if I can find a new one, and then transplant this hat anyway. So I think that's worth a little destruction. I'm actually going to try going in here. Ooh. Very brittle plastic. It's actually probably not really intended to come apart. I was right about this being a hat. There's some kind of... This looks like it would be paper, but it's very very delicate paper. That makes sense. So underneath the battery is protected by an internal fuse. There's a little door for accessing the 20 amp fuse. And it looks like, can't really get a perfect shot of it, but it's really just a PCB with a track on it, a specifically sized track. Though getting inside it like that does have its advantages. I can now salvage as much of the connector as is reasonable. So that's good. There's a lot of, I mean, you know, this is fairly large, at least in modern and 2020 terms, for a battery pack. So if I really wanted to, I would be able to make a much smaller battery pack that would probably have quite a bit longer life than this does, yeah, 2.3 amp hour, 12 volts, so that wouldn't be too difficult. With this original battery pack, if you were out in the field recording with your camera and this VCR, you would have gotten an hour and a half of runtime, so not even enough to fill up one short play video cassette. So now that I know the polarity of this, I'm just gonna cut it off carefully. I only want to cut one wire at a time. That's mostly just paranoia on my part because it's completely dead. I guess it's best practice to. Yeah. There we go. So that's off. I'm going to be able to wire this up to my bench power supply and see if this will turn on. Ordinarily, you'd want to look inside of vintage electronics before you do that, and this isn't too much of an exception, but since it's DC powered and I can use a power supply with current limiting, I'm gonna just go for it and see if it blows up. Actually, why not take one precautionary step? I've got the wire plugged into the unit and I've got either end connected to my multimeter, the positive and negative. I'm just going to step through the resistance ranges and make sure it's clearly not shorted. Might expect to get some high resistance, but I have no idea what the circuitry inside here is, so we might not. It might be that, yeah, it's fake. Yeah, so nothing's shorted inside, so nothing gonna blow up most likely, although this has a considerably lower voltage and current capability than the power supply, even with current limiting on. Okay, I've got this hooked up. The sticker on the bottom says that it takes 8 watts at 12 volts DC, so that calculates out to 666 milliamps. I've got this set for 690 just to give it a little, you know, a little bit of overhead. The wires are kind of conventionally labeled, despite the polarity of the jack being non-conventional. So the white wire is positive, goes to the outside of the barrel, and the wire without the line on it, the black wire or gray wire in this case, is the negative. So I've got the red lead on the outside, and I'll go poke the middle, and we get 12.3 volts. I've got negative to shield, negative to tip, negative to tip, negative to tip, negative to tip, and positive to shield. So I'm ready to plug this in. Alright, I've paranoid triple checked about 4 times now. I have my clamp meter on one of the wires, so I'll be able to see if anything is going wrong, although hopefully the power supply being in current limit is going to prevent that. I have no idea what kind of indication we're going to get on the front here, but let's find out. I'm going to start by turning the power supply on. The big, little clunking power supply, or little clunking switch on the front is off. So let's turn the power supply on. 0 amps, that's good. 0 milliamps is what we'd expect, unless this was a soft switch, but it's not. And yeah, we're going into current limit. I'm going to turn the current up a bit. Turn itself off. Appears it's capable of turning itself off. Now it isn't. The battery is showing full, I presume. That's what that green light means. I'm not really sure what the mechanical arrangement in here is, since it's a portable unit, it would make sense for it to be a direct drive, especially since it's DC, or at least that's how we would do it nowadays, but I don't know if that's the case. Well, this is going to be a little blurry and a little handy-cammy, but hopefully you'll be able to see what's going on in there. And nothing. So for reasons I'm not even particularly clear on, this is the only VHS tape that I have in my possession. I'm going to go ahead and pop that in there, and we'll see if it will work with a tape in it. And adjust you again. Well, it's certainly trying to do something. It's going into current limit again. So that 8 watts is an average, which is, you know, kind of what you'd expect. There's motors and probably relays and solenoids and all sorts of crap in here. Okay. I don't know if you saw, it did try to move. That is not a good sound. Small disaster. The mechanism that loads the tape worked once. A couple of interesting bits. I managed to get the tape out. It's a little worse for wear, but I think it'll be okay. When I first turn it on, you can see the read head spins up. So that part works. And this here, this little spindle, is actually the sensor that tells it if there is if there's a cassette in there. Be quiet. Multimeter has opinions on how long it should be on for. Anyway, it's not a particularly advanced sensor, so if I just cover it with my fingers, I can hit play, and it will believe that it's playing. And everything is moving except these reels. I believe these are supposed to move. I'm not 100% sure on how VHS players work. Yeah, actually, now that I'm playing with this, you can see that this belt is very loose. And there's this one here. It's probably supposed to spin. The capstan does move. Let's see if I can get this to work in a way that you'll be able to see. Yeah, the capstan spins. So this is probably a direct drive, but what I need to get working, probably just what I need to replace the belt on, is this spindle over here. Doesn't appear to be doing anything. Yeah, actually we can see if I hit rewind, see this one does start spinning, so that is working. But if I hit play or fast forward, just get a clicking. So I think the motor is probably turning. Actually, I can probably tell from the power supply. Yeah, that doesn't seem unreasonable. I think the motor is turning just fine. There's just something else in there is messed up, and that's why this isn't turning. So I'll have to get more of it apart. This is unfortunately going to be a mechanical repair. Alright, I haven't made any particularly useful ingress yet. I did manage to feel the belt down there, and that's definitely at least part of the problem. This is the last interesting thing, or at least somewhat interesting thing I wanted to show. On this video, it's really hard to see on the camera, but whatever kind of logic they're using, it's slow enough that you can just barely, with your eyes, see it oscillate when you try and, push a button that it can't actually do right now. It knows it can't fast forward or rewind because it isn't detecting a tape. And I can see as it tries to, and then goes back to stop mode and then goes to rewind, so I can see the oscillation of the logic, which I thought was kind of interesting. I'm sure I'm going to be able to get this apart to work on. You know, the price of this thing when it was new, it had to be designed for serviceability. But the repair and the working of this is going to be another video.